Hello everyone, I'm Megan Sullivan and welcome to this demo impressions video for Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, which I'm reviewing on the PlayStation 4 but is also available on Xbox One, Xbox Series X, PC, and PlayStation 5. I'll be honest, I almost didn't bother with this video since I've paid scant attention to this game. It's coming out during a very crowded review season. But since the new demo dropped, I thought, what the heck, why not? And downloaded it anyway. So did I like it? Yes! Well, sort of. It's complicated. Let me explain. Well, first let me explain what this game is, and then we'll analyze it a bit further. For those who don't know, Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin is a kind of reimagining of the very first Final Fantasy game, a turn-based JRPG released by Square back in 1987. The game followed the adventures of 4 warriors of light, tasked with saving the world from a series of evil beings led by an entity known as Chaos. Now over 30 years later, Square Enix has decided it would be fun to recreate the first Final Fantasy as an action title, and has teamed up with Team Ninja of Neo and Ninja Gaiden fame to create just that. The result is a fast-paced and at times difficult action-adventure game starring 4 scruffy edgelords with no memory and no Fs to give. And that's about as much as I can tell you about the story so far, although just to be clear, yes, these Warriors of Light are still looking for chaos and still have crystals, but they definitely look different from the 8-bit sprites of yore. There's the sneering Billy Idol lookalike Jack, Ash, a prettier version of WWE superstar Roman Reigns, the flippant and forgettable Jed, and Neon, who looks like she stepped out of Final Fantasy Type 0? Now let me just say this. Despite being a group of roided up slobs, seriously, what is up with Jack's wrinkle-infested shirt at the start of the game? I actually like the character models in Stranger of Paradise. A lot of people are ragging on the game's graphics overall, and okay, they're not great, but I don't think they're that bad. And I love the music, which is a hilarious mix of tunes from the original Final Fantasy and Western songs. It's weird, and I'm here for it. I've also heard some people complain they don't like the heroes in general, but I'm going to be very generous here and assume that all the bad, over-the-top dialogue and hyper-masculinity on display is meant to be tongue firmly placed in cheek humor. However, admittedly, it's hard to say, and I can see how these toxic dude bros rub some people the wrong way, especially Jack, who looks perpetually angry about the fact that he might be on his way to a white wedding. Which, if Princess Sarah's outfit and attitude is any indication, he might very well be doing whether he wants to or not. By the way, if you're hesitant to start Stranger of Paradise because you don't like a lot of story exposition, worry not. The breezy plot wastes no time throwing you into the thick of things, so you don't have to suffer through 30 minutes of unskippable cutscenes blocking your progress. Unfortunately, that's the job of the overworld map, and this is my biggest issue with Stranger of Paradise. While looking for chaos and attempting to resolve the group's amnesia problem, because what is a JRPG? Even an action-based one without amnesia. The player is assigned a series of missions that appear on the overworld map as individual dungeons that must be completed before moving on to the next mission. Makes sense, but it quickly becomes apparent that in order to drive the narrative forward, you're going to have to do some intense level grinding along the way, which means revisiting the same dungeons over and over again until you're ready to move forward. Now, I might have said that level grinding in this case isn't terrible, because as I'll explain in a minute, there's a lot of cool revamped Final Fantasy job classes to play as, which means combat isn't in danger of being terribly repetitive. But the job classes aren't the problem. The problem is the game's jaw-droppingly poor level design. Every dungeon in the game so far has been a series of ugly, linear corridors that look exactly alike. And since there's no minimap, I repeat, no minimap, it's very easy to get turned around and find yourself accidentally backtracking when you thought you were going forward. This makes for boring and frustrating dungeon exploration. So what kept me going as long as I did? The combat! The meat and potatoes of Stranger of Paradise. I mentioned Stranger of Paradise is akin to action games like Neo and Ninja Gaiden, and the zany, fast-paced battles reflect this. Instead of taking turns trading fisticuffs with enemies like a traditional turn-based combat system, you can literally charge right into the action and start wailing on familiar Final Fantasy monsters like bombs and goblins. Now, while your AI companions, only 2 of which can accompany you at a time, which is weird because in the original Final Fantasy, you had 4 team members at once, Anyway, your AI companions start off with only one job class. Ash is a hard-hitting pugilist and Jed is a nimble duelist, and they'll only learn a new job class at the end of the demo. However, the cool thing about your playable character Jack is right from the start, he's a jack of all trades, get it? And with just a quick tap of a button, this brooding beast can switch between being a hard-hitting swordsman, an axe-wielding marauder, and a fire-wielding mage. And I like that flexibility since different enemies have different weaknesses to exploit. Now, Stranger of Paradise wastes no time introducing you to a ton of different job classes, all capped at level 30, and all of which feel appropriately distinct and fun to mess around with. Each job has a normal attack, a series of fun combo attacks, a powerful action ability that can help break through an enemy's shield, known as a break gauge, and a special ability known as Lightbringer, which does serious damage and often leads straight into a finishing move known as Soul Burst, where Jack violently kills off an enemy. The gore can be turned off in settings, by the way. These different abilities are fun to use, well, as long as you don't burn through the MP meters attached to them, but since there's so much to learn for each job class, all of which need to be leveled up separately, and so many enemy weaknesses and abilities to keep track of, it's easy to get confused and even overwhelmed, especially when you have multiple enemies to contend with and are trying to remember what button does what, and is now a good time for your AI companions to use their special resonance abilities, which makes them more proactive in a fight and can afford Jack a bit of a breather. On top of that, enemies can be tough, even if you dive into the settings and adjust the difficulty level. That means you have to carefully watch an opponent's attacks and decide whether you want to guard, evade, aka roll out of the way, or parry via either Soul Shield, which makes you more vulnerable to enemy fire but replenishes magic points needed to launch powerful attacks, and or Instant Ability, a super fun skill that lets you catch projectiles being thrown at you and hurl them right back at the enemy with zero cost to your MP meter. The problem is that even when enemies have a bit of a tell that hints which action to use, the timing of these crucial defensive maneuvers can sometimes be difficult to discern, especially when A, there's a lot of action on the battlefield, and B, the enemy target feature sometimes switches targets without my permission, which is weird. And because of that, I died a lot at the hands of hard-hitting enemies, some of which I couldn't even see because they were slightly off screen or behind me, which was really frustrating. If there's a way to fix that in the settings, I couldn't find it. Now, I admit I'm not great at action games, and I've seen people pull off some cool maneuvers in Stranger of Paradise, so maybe if I had renewed my PlayStation Plus subscription, which I totally forgot to do, oops, I could have gone online and asked veteran players of Ninja Gaiden to join me in 3-person multiplayer mode and teach me how to be a better warrior of light. Alas, I don't have PlayStation Plus right now, so that didn't happen. Luckily, I still managed to scrape through most fights by A, chugging wonderfully accessible health potions, just a click of the D-pad away, and constantly upgrading and enhancing weapons and gear, which there is plenty of. Yes, loot drops are a thing in Stranger of Paradise, and equipment is ranked by rarity. And I admit I was very amused by the job-affiliated, stat-boosting cosplay attire you can show off while your characters are conversing in cutscenes or milling about in a dungeon, trying to figure out where they're supposed to go. These silly outfits remind me that Stranger of Paradise may seem up its own butt, which to a point it is, let's be honest, but it's also in fact a tongue-in-cheek romp meant to put a smile on people's faces because it's just so wacky and zany. If that's the goal, mission accomplished. More than once I laughed at the bad dialogue and over-the-top characters. But as funny as the game is, poor level design and sometimes less than intuitive combat make the game feel kind of, meh at times. Which is why I think I'm going to pass on Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, at least for now. I just don't have the patience to get lost in dungeons or level grind my way to the next mission, especially when there are so many great games demanding my attention. With that said, I don't want to turn people off of this game completely. It's not bad by any means, so if you enjoy titles like Neo, Bayonetta, and Devil May Cry, this demo might be worth checking out. It's free after all, and you can always carry the save file over into the full game if you enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching, guys. See you later!